Good evening, Yotunde. We're live on YouTube now.
Good evening and welcome to the Apprenticeship Week for the year 2021. We are here live all over the across the UK nationally to bring to you today Apprenticeship Week, organized by our host tonight, Rani Moorcroft, MBE.
Thank you, Yotunde. That's very kind of you. I think also, if I'm not mistaken, we have a guest from the USA tuning in as well. Hello, Jackie, if you're over there. If we just say hello to our guests, but also everybody watching, and for everybody that will be tuning into YouTube later on. Very, very delighted to have this session, if you show a slide, please, which is on law, policing, and the NHS. Part of this is that just to kick off this apprenticeship week, we're looking at all different spheres of what affects us today. We're in a global pandemic, so there are a lot of things that have crushed our spirits, I suppose, for the last almost a year and a half. So we've got to come out, as soon as we defeat it, we come out kicking and shouting and waving the flag for a global Britain. Build the Future is Apprenticeship Week. And our particular one, we are calling Build a Green Future for a Global Britain. So whether you are 8 or whether you're 108, this is for you. We've spent a little bit of time ironing out the little glitches, so I'm going to invite our first guest to speak. And if he can get ready, this is a very informal session. This is people talking from the heart about where they've come from, the journey they've had to get where they are, and also encouraging lots of people to come with us. The theme of it actually is key workers, because whether you look at the NHS, the medic that we're going to talk to in a minute, or whether we go through to the police officer that keeps us safe on the streets, or whether we go to the courts to make sure that justice is done and the bad people are locked up, you've got them all here. So Gul, can we start with you, Naz? This is Gul Nawaz Hussain, who is a QC, a barrister, and also Sheffield Race Inquiry Commission member of. So he's going to tell us a little bit of what he does and some of the people that he's met and also the things that he feels are important today. So over to you, Naz.
Hi, Ronnie. Thank you for such a warm welcome and a very generous introduction. I'll send you the £5 in the post.
£10.
£10. My name is Gul Nawaz Hussain. I'm a criminal barrister. I specialize in criminal defense. And in 2018, I was appointed Queen's Counsel, which is a rank bestowed upon you and allows you to work in the most serious cases that appear before the courts. My background, if you were to look at it, probably you wouldn't have predicted that I would end up where I am today. And that's really the message that I want to get out to everyone who's listening, that don't allow your circumstances to define your final destination. In truth, if you were to ask me as a kid what I wanted to be Batman. And if you were to ask me now, I'd probably still say I want to be Batman. So I'm sort of there. I get to wear a cape and dispense justice. So I'm sort of sort of half the way there. But as a child, my experiences growing up in an immigrant household, seeing the hardships that my father went through. My father was a steel worker until he retired. And he came to this country when he was about 12, 13 years old, and lied about his age and started working at that age, so didn't have the benefit of schooling, and worked right through until the age of retirement. And he worked extremely hard together with my mum to give my sisters and me the best opportunities that they could possibly give us. Luckily, all three of us were able to capitalize on those opportunities. My younger sister is a police officer. She was the first hijab-wearing police officer in South Yorkshire Police. My sister, older than her, has a first-class honours in chemistry, doctorate from Leeds, and is currently teaching out in Dubai. And I do what I do. But it was my childhood experiences really that shaped what I wanted to do, and more importantly, how I wanted to do the job that I wanted to do. My dad couldn't read and write English, so from a very young age, I would go with him to act occasionally as an interpreter for more difficult words, but then to fill in forms for him and to read letters for him. And essentially, that's the job of an advocate. You're speaking on behalf of people who are unwilling or unable to do so themselves. So I was actually doing the job that I ultimately ended up doing from a very young age. And I appreciated the importance of having people who are willing to step forward and do that. I also saw what happened to my dad when he was working, when he encountered racism and prejudice within the workplace, how that wasn't treated seriously. And it was through supporting him that ultimately some of those that were responsible for the abuse that he was suffering were disciplined and then sacked, but the company effectively had to be forced into that position. So it showed me the power that the law can give to an individual to right the wrongs that an individual is suffering. And I also, obviously, I grew up in a working class community, and not all the experiences that I witnessed with the police were positive. That's not to say that that's the view I hold now, far from it. My younger sister is a police officer. And we will all have witnessed things that we're not happy with, but the choice is, what do we do about it? Do we sit and complain from the sidelines, or do we stand up to make the difference? Because everybody's looking for things to change, but nobody's willing to be the cause of that change. And that's something I wanted to do. So from a young age, I wanted to do the job that I ultimately do. But I think as I got older, society subconsciously, to an extent, started to place walls around my aspirations. And I started to limit myself, almost talking myself out of doing the things I wanted to do. So don't do law, because even if you pass the degree, you're not going to be able to get a job. If you get onto the bar course and pass those exams, you won't be able to get a pupillage. Nobody's going to take you on. You know, you're Northern, you're Asian, you're Muslim. So this was obviously what was being fed into me from around me in society. And I allowed this to an extent start to impact upon me and start to cause me to doubt my aspirations. But then mercifully, I was able to take advice from good friends and mentors, and also get a grip of myself and realize that I had to give 100% effort to what I wanted to achieve. And really, the results were out of my control. All I had to do was give it 100%. And that's all that anyone could ask of me. It's all I could ask of myself. So going through to university, I didn't go to a fantastic university. And when it came time to applying for pupillages, which is the sort of apprenticeship you serve, I didn't have lots of work experience within the legal field. I didn't know anyone in the legal field. But in terms of those of you who are thinking about embarking upon the kind of career I have, or any other one, you need to look at your life, and it's easy for us as individuals to dismiss the things that we've experienced and the things that we've achieved. Because it's us that's done them, we almost see it as insignificant. But sometimes it helps to speak to someone and tell them the things you've done, or just speak freely, and you'll be amazed at what other people find remarkable about your life. And you know, I didn't have the benefit of a fantastic school, but as a schoolboy and into my late teens and early 20s, I competed in Thai boxing. And I realized that all these things that other kids had by going to posh schools and having lots of work experience, I essentially gained from the knocks that I received, figurative and literal, in the ring. So I learned to confront fear. I learned to develop confidence. I learned to master my emotions. All these things happened in this crucible where I could suffer an injury, and that was quite an intense crucible. So I realized that that was a unique experience that I had, and it was for me to try to sell that to the people that I was meeting. So that became a core part of the package of me. Not that I just did this Thai boxing, but what I gained from it, what positive skills and attributes I gained from it that would allow me to do the job that I wanted to do better than anybody else. The same was true of the help and support that I gave to my dad and his friends in the community. I realized that this was advocacy in its purest form. So I put that down on my forms, and I spoke about it in my interviews and said that, in my opinion, it was better than spending 2 weeks in court sat behind someone, because I was physically doing things to help people to change the situation that they were in. And I knew that those were unique to me. Not many other people would have gone through those experiences. So once I was willing to look at my own life and look at it through a clear lens, rather than dismissing things I'd achieved, I started to realize I actually did have lots of really positive examples that I could use to put myself forward as a really good candidate, and examples that other people wouldn't have. And something else I'd say, I'm not necessarily saying it's something you should all do, but it's the choice that I made. I chose to make it clear what I wanted to do and how I wanted to do it. So I wrote on my forms about how I wanted to change the system and how I wanted to change society for the better. And I went to an interview, and one of the first questions this person asked me was, I've read what you've said about wanting to make a difference. Are you on some kind of crusade? And it was almost like time slowed down for me. And I started to have this conversation with myself, which was, well, look, he's asked this and it has a slightly pejorative tone to the question, and I could answer it in a way that would pacify him and make him feel more comfortable and easy. Or I could answer it honestly. And very quickly, I knew what the answer was for me personally, which is, to thine own self be true. So I said, yes, I am. And as far as I'm concerned, it's a far more noble cause than wanting to be a barrister because my mum and dad were barristers, or just for the money. I want to make a difference. And I walked out of there and I thought to myself, well, you know, I'm probably not going to get a pupillage there, but I was happy with myself because I answered in the way that I wanted to answer, and I could live with that. So if I was knocked back, I wasn't going to cry about it. But as it turns out, that was the place that called me back and offered me the pupillage. So I would say always be true to yourself. Find out why you want to do something, because the why is so important. My son aspires to be a Royal Marines officer and go on to serve in the Special Forces. And he's very lucky to have had mentors who are former operators. And they've always told him about selection, which is the hardest thing that you can attempt in the British military. And they've said, find out the why, because as long as you know the why, the how is always going to be easy, because no matter what you face, the why, the answer to that question will allow you to overcome the obstacle. So find out why you want to do the thing you want to do, and keep that at the core. And it doesn't matter what it is, because when you speak and you speak genuinely from the heart, that passion and that emotion always comes out and across to the person that you're speaking to. So even now when I do closing speeches, which is what I think is one of the things I do best in my job, I don't have to believe everything that my client says. That's not what my job is. But I try to find something in there that evokes some kind of emotion in me, and I will build my speech around that, and it allows me to give something more genuine, and allow me to connect with the jury. So never underestimate the value of the why you want to do something. Having said all this, will you encounter difficulties, particularly if you're working class, white, or of whatever race, or if you're from the BME communities? Yes, you will, and I've encountered them. But the decision you have to make is how you're going to deal with them. So I'm not extremely proud of what I'm about to tell you, but I will tell you, and I'm slightly proud of it. But I remember at university, I signed up to a mentor scheme where you were going to be given somebody who would help hopefully fuel your ambition to achieve your goal. And I was given a lawyer from a particular organization. And the first time I met him, it was in a huge room. It was like speed dating, so lots of tables, and you sat down. And the first 10 minutes, this person spent telling me how all his friends who had been to Oxford and Cambridge couldn't get a pupillage, couldn't get an apprenticeship. So he was essentially telling me I had no chance because I went to this rubbish university compared to Oxford and Cambridge. And I had to make a decision, and I'm not saying it's the right thing for everyone, but I made the decision that I was happy with. And I stood up and I told him in strong terms that I wasn't interested in what he had to say. And I turned around and I walked out because I knew the challenges that I faced. I didn't need anybody to tell me how difficult it was going to be. I was aware of how difficult it was going to be. I didn't need anyone to push me further down. And that's something that you will encounter. People always talk about the difficulties you'll encounter because of your race, your sex, or your ethnicity, or your socioeconomic background. But you'll also encounter difficulties from your circle around you. So you may aspire to become educated, to achieve. And sometimes when you have aspirations, it can make those people around you feel uncomfortable because it makes them look at their own lives and perhaps what they have done or haven't done. And they can try to sort of want to pour cold water on your aspirations to drag you down, to make themselves feel better. And you shouldn't underestimate the debilitating impact that can have. So you have to be alert to it and be able to pick up on that and see it for what it is, and be able to put that out of your life. In terms of the sort of more standard bigotry, yes, of course it exists, because it exists in society. To imagine that it won't exist within the legal profession or the police or the NHS is wishful thinking. But the question is how are you going to deal with it? There's a famous, one of my idols, someone who I looked to help inspire me, was Muhammad Ali. And I remember him talking about fighting, and he said, if I wanted to fight, I could fight 50 times a day when I walked down the street. And this was during the time of the civil rights movement, because people were swearing at him, challenging him. He had to make the decision. He chose not to engage with those individuals. He chose to pick the battles that he wanted to fight. And that's what I've tried to do. And that's what I encourage you to do. Sometimes discretion is the better part of valor. So if you hear something, turn away and walk away is the best thing to do. Sometimes picking someone up on it and asking them what they mean is the best thing to do, because often I have found when you hear dodgy things, it's often out of ignorance. People don't mean to be offensive. It's because they don't know any better. And if you come down on people like a ton of bricks, what you do is you force them into their shell, and they either feel offended and upset or become steadfast in their position. What you need to do is help people understand why perhaps what they've said isn't acceptable. And that requires tact and discretion, and a degree of diplomacy, and sometimes humor. Humor helps. But there will be times when you will have to face horrible situations and you'll have to stand up. It might not even be for yourself. It might be for somebody else. I always live by the saying of there go I but for the grace of God. So if I see something happening, I have a duty to try to help in some way, shape or form, because it could well be me that needs that help in the future. And it doesn't mean you have to be Batman and jump in and physically get involved. It can just be standing next to someone who's being abused and letting them know that there's someone there to support them, contacting the police to alert them to what's happening. But in the workplace, it's difficult because people are worried about losing their jobs, their position. Particularly if you complain, people can regard you as being someone who has a chip on your shoulder. And what I found is all the people I've spoken to from BME backgrounds, working class backgrounds, ultimately have a higher threshold for the level of abuse they'll take, because if they were to deal with everything that happened, like Muhammad Ali, they'd be fighting every single day. So you have to determine for yourself, what things am I going to challenge? Which things am I going to let pass for now and deal with them later? But it's something that's happened to me during my career, attempts, people trying to bully me because they feel that they have the power. Even when I became a QC, in not so many words, somebody said to me it was because I was given it because I was black. There was some kind of quota and they had to meet it. And sometimes, it strikes, those kinds of comments strike us at our core, particularly when we work so hard to achieve something. But the mistake we should never make is to act in anger in response to those things. But certainly never, ever let them go unchecked. So my advice to you, I think, am I speaking for too long? I don't want to go on and take other people's time. But my advice to everyone who's listening is the fact that you're part of this discussion is the first step that you've taken to show that you want to achieve something. So don't allow that now to wane. You've taken this step forward. Ignore the people around you who might be making fun of you because you want to achieve something. Ignore those people ahead of you and above you who want to push you down because they don't think you deserve to be where you are. And it doesn't matter which university you go to, what you do. Don't get me wrong. If you can get 3 A's at A level, do it. If you can get a first class honors degree, do it. Because if you imagine, it's like the grid on Formula One. If you have a first class honors degree from Cambridge, you will be in pole position. There's no doubt about that. But once that race starts, pole position means nothing. And there's nothing to stop somebody like me in my old Datsun, if they still make Datsuns, coming up from position number 25 through hard work, grit, determination, overtaking, and passing you. So no matter where you start from, you have the chance to move forward. In order to ensure you don't get a defeatist mentality or deflated, be aware of the risks and the challenges. So I was fully aware of how difficult it was going to be for me to achieve the goal of becoming a barrister, let alone becoming a QC. So I was aware of it and I weighed it up in my mind and I decided, okay, I'm going to go for this. I know what the risks are and I'm going to go for it. And if I didn't make it, I was content. Don't go into things blind. Particularly now when you have to pay for your studies, you have to take a good, long, hard look at yourself. If you're somebody who doesn't like speaking in public, then becoming a barrister is probably the wrong thing for you to do. And as much as you want to do it, unless you're prepared to deal with that fundamental issue first, the chances of you succeeding aren't there. So you have to be honest when you look at yourself as well. What you don't want to be is what I often describe to people is those people who go on X Factor and their mums told them they're a really good singer and they go there and they sound like a cat being murdered. And when everyone tells them you can't sing, they're like, no, I can. My mum says I'm a good singer. And they walk off in denial. You don't want to be that person. So have an honest look at yourself. What are you good at? What are your strengths? What can you develop? And do that real honest sort of assessment, stock take of yourself. Look at the goal you want to achieve. And if you've made the decision, I know this is difficult, just like I did. The chances of me succeeding are slim, but I'm going to give it my all. Once you've made that decision, put your head down and just start moving forward. And you need to ignore the people around you that are going to be trying to distract you and dissuade you from what you want to do. There's a really good saying, it originates from the sort of Caucasus region, Dagestan, Chechnya, where they say, the dogs bark, but the caravan keeps moving. And that's what you need to do. The dog just wants to distract you. It wants you to engage with it, to stop forward momentum And as soon as you do that, the dog's successful. The dog's never going to be convinced by your arguments because he's a dog. So what you need to do is keep moving on that road. And even if it's small steps, you know, I go out into the hills with my son and I try to keep up with him. You know, we wear the backpacks and we head off into the Peak District. And it gets really hard going up some of those steep hills. And when you look at the hill, it's massive. But then all you can do to really achieve it is to look down at your feet and think, I'm going to take this one step at a time. And each small step forward is one step further away from where you were and one step closer to your objective. And that's what you need to do with your big goals, with your big dreams. Just take it step at a time. Find good people, find good role models, surround yourself with them, and always help other people. A candle never diminishes by lighting another candle. So give that help to other people. Be the person you wish you had the benefit of giving you help. And if you start to do that and everyone starts to do that, one, the world gets a lot better, but people will stand a far better chance of succeeding.
That's a wonderful way of saying goodnight. That is absolutely stunning. Thank you so much. The caravan, unfortunately, does have to roll, but I tell you what, Naz, I want to go and join. You know, the apprenticeships from April, as long as you're over 25, you can go until you're 100. You can be an apprentice. So roll on. Thank you again.
You're welcome. Thank you for inviting me.
Please hang on and, listen, because I think the next speaker has got a similar path to you. Can I introduce Ben Julian Harrington, who is the Chief Constable of Essex. And this is one of the largest areas to police. And I don't know if I'm going to call him Chief or if I call him BJ. Is he there? Can you come and say hello?
Hi, Ronnie. BJ, yes. By all means, call me BJ, please.
BJ, because, you know, this is going to probably upset somebody. But I understand that they call you Chief. And as I'm Sri Lankan, so I'm classified as an Indian. I don't think we want chiefs and Indian on this show at this moment in time, do we? So we would love to hear, because I know all the things. I think I know a lot of things about you. You come from Tottenham. You come from North London. You believe that community spirit is the most important thing because the police are the community. You're not a race apart to be mistrusted. We turn to you when we're in trouble, but we turn to you when we want to be friends as well. So if you'll give us a little bit about your journey. Amy's sitting there, one of your new police officers, I hope, in time. And Vernal also is around here. So maybe we can have a little chat. But I am sorry, it's the technical difficulties have cut into your time. Will you have to leave us early soon?
No, I can stay with you to the end.
Oh, well, I am honoured because I know how busy your time is. So if you can also cover in some of the work, the burning questions that I'm going to ask, which is, at the moment, you have handled one of the most, well, I suppose it's a world case with the people smugglers and how horrendous that was that made world news. I thought you did it very sympathetically. I thought your officer in charge, who was a woman, was quite extraordinary. Congratulations to you. You treated those people with honour, the dead ones and their families, and not the answer that a lot of racists say, well, they shouldn't have been trying to smuggle themselves into this country anyway. The second thing, BJ, is one that worries me greatly. It's knife crime. It's a rise in county lines. It's a grooming of our children. How do we overcome that? And how difficult is that a job for you? So I won't talk anymore. Can I leave the stage to you?
Ronnie, thank you. And it's a real privilege. And I feel quite humbled speaking after Naz, who's just hugely impressive story. So so thank you for, just to hear that was wonderful. OK, so I hope a couple of things here, as well as answering your questions, Ronnie. I hope that, I can hopefully leave people who are watching who can think policing is something in all its shapes and all its forms that they might consider as a career to be part of that community. And Vernal, and I know Sean, one of my officers, is here listening, and I hope people know this. I really do think that policing is about community. We police with consent in this country. And that's so important. It sets us apart, I think, from almost every other police force across the world, save those of Australia and New Zealand, really, that have come from an element of British policing. Because you said it, the police of the community of the police. I think Sir Robert Peel said that, only being citizens in uniform. And I think that's a really important belief for me. And I know Naz talked about what you believe in, and I genuinely do believe in that. And that sort of informs a lot of my views. So you sort of hinted at where I come from. Born and brought up in Palmer's Green in North London, and from a mother who moved here at age 18 with £5 to become a nurse, and from the Republic of Ireland, and a father who was born in Essex. So I've got a bit of Essex roots, and it's always, although as you could tell from the accent, I'm a North London boy, so went to Catholic school in North London. Had great and distant things and destined for university, but things worked out differently, and I sort of scraped through with 2 A-levels and probably much to my mother's disappointment, probably didn't achieve as much as as she would have hoped for me at that point. I hope I've been able to show her, after 31 years of some promise for all of her investment and tears in my youth, so joined. Worked in a couple of jobs and wasn't quite sure, not as dedicated or as clear as Naz in terms of what I wanted to do. Worked for a bank for a while, worked for Her Majesty's Customs and Excise, and sort of enjoyed the investigative role, but also enjoyed outdoor work, and was actually part of the Territorial Army then, of volunteers, as part of the Parachute Regiment. So sort of twin track there, and two of my interests there, really sort of physical, active, outdoor, and dynamic lifestyle, also with the investigative and also the community and public service in there. So of course in 1990 that saw me joining the Metropolitan Police and starting my career in North East London, in Walthamstow and Chingford, and policing a local community there as a beat officer, as a response officer there, and getting to know and really starting to understand what are some of the issues of policing with communities, working with communities, and understanding how you can make such a difference to people's lives, and also how important policing is in keeping people safe. So from there, moved on, and a lot of my time has been spent policing public order, and I'm in fact the National Police Chiefs Council lead for public order policing for the country, and a number of times spent on the Metropolitan Police Territorial Support Group, so specialist sort of public order policing around that. So spent some time there, and then on promotion to sergeant went to Tottenham, a place I was familiar with. Lots of friends from Tottenham and that part of North East London, and spent a number of years there policing, which is really where my experience, my knowledge of policing in and with the community was really formulated. I worked as the specialist sergeant with responsibility for the Broadwater Farm Estate, a wonderful community, I have to say, despite a very troubled history, a very difficult history around it, but a wonderful community where policing was genuinely dealing with some of the most difficult issues, but also with the support of, and sometimes with some tensions with the community, and learnt lots about how working with different communities, policing can make a difference to deal with the criminals that damage and hurt and harm, and I'll come back to knife crime and things like that, but also how policing does allow people to prosper, does give people safety, our young people in particular, and of course to help support communities. And I think policing's got many lessons to learn and continues to learn those, but each time, certainly in my experience, there is a willingness, and I hope people who would come and join policing, and I'll talk about all the many different areas that are available when you talk about apprenticeships and it's a career, that we do try and learn those things, and certainly my experience has always been to try and learn and better police for communities. So from there, worked across London in various shapes and roles, working in central London, in Westminster, had some interesting responsibilities for terrorism, and working with particularly the Muslim community at the time of the 7/7, 21/7 bombings, working when of course Islamic inspired terrorism was something that particularly affected all of the issues, working with local communities there to make sure, one, we understood what some of those issues are, and obviously the concerns that were raised by communities at that time. It's a very difficult time for the Muslim community, and also learning a great deal about how they could work with policing to ensure that we were fair, seen to be fair, and maintained as best we could the support of different communities who were affected by world events and of course directly affected by policing. Worked in Lewisham in southeast London, working a very diverse and different, and of course the most culturally diverse bit of that was being a North London boy moving to South London to work. And of those of you, if anyone who's lived in London will know that that is nosebleed territory for anybody who crosses the Thames to work in the other side. So, but all joking aside, was able to see a very different part of London and some very different communities, and built some great contacts and worked across independent advisory groups with community leaders to really try and improve confidence in policing, to tackle, again, coming back to the point you made, Ronnie, knife crime, gang crime, and young people being hurt by criminality, but to see how we do that from the enforcement perspective, because there's a really important role, but also from the community perspective, working with local community leaders, local youth leaders, to try and how we build that confidence and trust, because we need to police with communities and not just police the community, which is something. And then moved up to police the Met's control rooms, nearly 2,000 staff working, doing all the 999 calls, and really was able to, for the first time, bring community focus into what are essentially command and control centres who have little, apart from the telephone, direct contact with the public, and was again supported by community groups from across all of London's 32 boroughs to introduce that with the support of a lady called Sylvia Maharaj, who was on the Met's in the race independent advisory group, to try and bring communities into that and open up the huge amount of great work that was done in support of London and keeping London safe, but also to make sure that communities engaged and supported and were able to inform policing within those what very often, as I say, at the end of the telephone, and not in direct physical contact with the public. And from there on to police the whole of North London, and then to be responsible for public order policing across London, which again, with many high profile protests and from things like Anonymous to many state visits and all of the things that fall around that. So pretty diverse. And then in 2017, came on secondment to Essex as the temporary Deputy Chief Constable. My previous boss, the previous Chief Constable, said, you'll learn to love the place. And I did. And then in 2018, of course, secured the job as Chief Constable with responsibility for policing and leading policing across this, really diverse county around that. So a mixed career around those things. And I think the one thing that I would say in terms of understanding is, I felt my way through that to start with, knew the things that I enjoyed, the areas that I liked, to be in public service, to have a dynamic career, to have a career that used your brain and your brawn, so to speak, around that. And I think policing offered that. And if you think about the range of jobs and the range of things that I've done in policing, from a beat constable, to running now and leading, the chief exec of a £330 million a year organisation, with the work and the interesting people I've met and the abilities I've had to learn from them, I think there are so many opportunities. And I think, I think Naz said it was about hard work, dedication, and the ability to work hard and to deal with the triumphs, because there have been some, and of course the disasters, because there's been some of those. And if you speak to any athlete, you'll hear they lost more races than they won around it. But to continue to do that, I think, is a really important message, and policing really does give you that opportunity to do that in so many interesting places. So, Ronnie, you asked me to talk about some of those key bits, and I think, if a career in policing and the opportunity to take up policing allows you to really get involved and help communities. And of course, you talked about knife crime, and we know that, I would say that violence is the biggest single challenge to the people of Essex. Essex is a relatively safe county. Most people will not come into contact with policing, but sadly, some people do. And of course, it is very often our young people. It is very often our most vulnerable people who find themselves impacted or affected. And I think in the terms of knife crimes, whether that's driven by, gangs, as we would call them, traditional postcode gangs, difference, or whether that's because of the scourge of county lines. I think, Rani, that is a really, really big challenge for us. But I hope you've seen in recent weeks, and certainly, that we get better and to target those who are causing the most harm, whether they originate in London or elsewhere. But importantly, to work with the communities where that's impacted and affected, to make sure that we deal with some of the protecting the vulnerable people. And I know there's a lot of commitment and effort from local community-based officers to make sure that we do that, whether that's through schools, through youth engagement, and of course with our local advisory groups and community safety teams, because that's so important. It's not just about tackling the criminality, but actually supporting the people who have, you know, as you referenced, been groomed or been made vulnerable around those. I think, you know, you referenced and talked about, you know, the tragedy that we saw in October 2019. Again, the 39 men, women, and some of them children, 15 years of age, who sadly died as they tried to come to our country to make a better life, and that was an extreme tragedy. And I'm really pleased that you recognise the compassion with which the officers who faced that challenge dealt with. We've been really, really clear that we tried to make a promise to the families of those people who tragically lost their life that we would bring justice, and I hope we have. We convicted 8 and sent some people to prison for a long time. Of course, that will never bring back the people they've lost. But I hope some of the work around learning, and I think we're now working, and Essex Police is working to lead the country in how we prevent this kind of thing happening again. Some of the things we were able to do, we're able to treat all of those, and we had a number of people who came forward to provide evidence who we didn't, who were at risk because they weren't here legally, but we were able to use those and build that confidence around those kind of things. So I think hopefully that gives an idea at two ends around the compassion that's in policing, and of course the job plug bit, really, because it is about apprenticeships, and of course you can see the background behind me. The core element of policing is about or as my daughters, and this is anyone who knows me, we're helping people, keeping them safe, and catching baddies. That's what my daughters would say, and that's what I think this is about. So of course some of that's about officers in uniform, as you see the pictures behind me. Some of that's about officers not in uniform, detectives, specialists. But it's also about special constables. It's about citizens who can support us and work with us. It's about community volunteers. It's about community support officers, detention officers, call centre managers, and call centres who take and deal with some of the most traumatised people. We've got a finance section, we've got an IT department. We're leading the way in terms of IT development across the country around that. We've got a workshop. We take on apprentices and recruits each year to, I've got working for me in Essex Police, I've got trained and qualified BMW engineers servicing our vehicles. We've got, program managers, we've got HR managers, we've got people who are finance managers to manage a £330 million a year budget. We have got HR professionals, as described. There are so many opportunities in policing, and from tech to media and all of those things. So of course I would just say, there are so many opportunities. It's a 21st century business. Our business is keeping people safe, helping them and catching baddies, but of course we need all of the support elements, all of the technical support from that. So please, always have a look at our website. The opportunities are great, and I will quote Naz, because if you do work hard, if you've got your interest, if that's what you want to do, then Essex Police, and in fact policing more widely, is a great place to do that, and there are many ways in which to do that. So Rani, I hope I've given you a taster of it. Hopefully I've sort of answered your questions, and I'll stop there.
Well, I just want to say something, because I'm very, very honoured that you supported what Yetunde and I did. We sit on the Basildon side-by-side BAME group, and part of our work is social cohesion, supporting the police, but also in the community. And we did a flotilla for Windrush Day, because I'm also a board member for the Windrush Housing Association. And as you were talking in the beginning, I had a little wry smile, because there you are. Your mother comes over with £5, was it, in pocket? There's Naz's dad coming over with nothing. And there's my father, who gave up everything with extreme riches to come to educate his daughters. I think you're a Windrush child. You know that. because the same sign in the window applied to us. No dogs, no blacks, no Irish. So you're an honorary one. I wonder if we can bring in, we're going to talk to Vernal in a minute because he epitomizes what you are trying to do. I was extremely pleased. Yetunde and I work very closely together. When we did our Windrush, everything was closed down. Thurrock was open, but Basildon wasn't. And we did boats to signify, people coming to Thurrock. And you allowed us to have your police launchers in that flotilla. They led, and you had 2 police officers in it. So everybody, please go to Z Generation UK's YouTube, look at the flotilla and listen to some of the speeches there, because it gives you the wealth of what this country is about. So it's wonderful to speak to you. And I wonder if Amy's got any questions. You've heard Amy, you've got big footsteps to follow. So do you want to come in and ask your possible boss anything?
Yes, hello. One of my main questions for you would be.
There she is. That's it. We can see you now.
Hello, you're right. One of my main questions was, what sort of leadership style do you think you convey?
Oh, that's a really difficult question. I think anybody knows me would say enthusiastic would be around that. I try, one of my personal things is to say, I can't be expert in all the things that the officers and staff in Essex Police do, but I do try to demonstrate that I'm willing to take part and support them in that. As I say, I'm the National Public Order lead. I think when I take that lead for the country, which is informing policing across country. I've been a public order officer. I've had bricks and bottles thrown at me. I've been involved in protest. I've been involved in football matches. So I would always try and say that I try and lead by example. I try to understand and experience the things that my officers, my staff are having to do, to listen to those, and also trying to provide some clarity in terms of that. But I hope I'm enthusiastic, because I think I hope I'm encouraging in my leadership style. I've got Vernal and I've got Sian there, so they may get some other comments. I'll look at the chat bar around that. But Amy, I think the one I would hopefully is a supportive leader, because I've got nearly 1.9 million people to look after, the longest coastline, second only to Cornwall, and a huge diversity across the county. I can't do policing on my own. I can't keep this county safe on my own. I need every single officer, staff member, volunteer, and to be able to do that, and I need to support them to deliver it. So that would be my summary: enthusiasm and supportive, I'd like to think.
And that's the best way to be.
Right. Well, that's it. Thank you very, very much. Catherine, we're having a lovely view of your little Christmas tree there. Is that a Christmas tree? It should be away. This is a family show. It is lovely to see all these funny little things that happen. Catherine is a great support to me, by the way. She's a volunteer. Half the time she's out there vaccinating people. She goes shopping and she cooks with me, Mum's Army, feeding the NHS nurses. So we've got a big one. Right, shall we bring in Vernal, and then we'll go to our lovely, I call her my baby doctor. Yes, she won't like that. That's got connotations, I think, that I don't mean. But shall we have Vernal, and why Vernal has come to Essex to share his diversity background with us. Hi, Vernal.
Hello. Good evening. I hope everybody can hear me. I'm sorry if I look a bit sort of glaring, like something out of a horror movie. But there it is. It's the best I think this computer is going to do today. Firstly, thank you so much for the invitation and the opportunity to share a little bit about me and hopefully inspire some of the people listening to chart their own journey and to be who they are, knowing that certainly a police force like Essex is a place where you can be yourself. Very similar to the speakers before me, my parents were part of the Jamaican Windrush generation and arrived to the signs that Rani just mentioned. And both parents found work wherever they could, to start a family, to buy their own home, and to fit in the best that they could within London society. And I remember being very, very young and going into the front door of a house that my parents had bought. And I remember my father having not one job or two, he had 3 jobs. And my mother was a seamstress and went out to work, and she also had a sewing machine at home and worked into the evening to pay the mortgage. And I'm the youngest of 5 children. And I learned quite early on in school that I was very much a protector of people who were picked on by other people. I was always the person to say, leave that person alone, and why don't you grow up and all of that, and being the person involved in starting debates in classrooms and things. And I discovered as I, got into my late teens, that I felt different in all sorts of ways, and felt very isolated by my difference, and didn't back then didn't know who to turn to, and yet within me, I think mostly because of my mother. My father left us when I was about 13, and my mother always said something about the law to me. She's one of those very proud West Indian women who paid attention if the Queen was on television. So we'd all sit around if the Queen was on television and pay attention, because my mother was paying attention. And my mother used to say, the police have got it wrong. Crime prevention doesn't start with locks and bolts and alarms. It starts with what you teach your children. Teach them to value themselves, teach them to own things that they earn. If you can't buy it yourself, it's not yours to have. So it was a very much a family based on British values, equality under the law, and respect for people. And my mother had 2 accents. She had a Jamaican one that she used to speak all the time. And then if the phone rang, as it did, she would say, hello, and she'd have this very posh accent. And we used to laugh at her for doing it. I wanted to, I thought, be an actor, and started a career at drama school, and then realizing that it was a bit of a dream. What did I really want to do? And I got back to listening to people around me and saying, you're always sticking up for other people, Vernal. Why don't you try and find something? And later on, HIV, AIDS came along. And there's a drama on TV at the moment that's causing quite a stir called It's a Sin. And, I won't go into too much detail about it other than to say that the heterosexual people in my family were hit very hard by HIV and AIDS. Both my brothers were living with hemophilia, and one of them got the virus that way. And by the time he knew about it, he'd already passed it on to his fiancée, and my sister, who carried the haemophilia gene, if you like, had passed it on to her son. And before I knew it, we had 4 funerals to do with AIDS. And I was, by that time, by coincidence, head of HIV services for the London Borough of Brent. And it was very odd to have members of my family being treated by my staff. It was a tough time, and the difference, as I was saying to Rani, between HIV and COVID-19 was that back then, HIV was stigmatized. People living with HIV were stigmatized. People were losing their families, their homes, their jobs. It was an awful time, mostly made up of prejudice against people, as one of the largest groups affected were gay men. And so it was very, very odd to find heterosexuals or rare at first to find heterosexuals affected. So with some years in my job as head of HIV services, my role diversified. I became a contracts manager and then an organizational development manager for the same council, Brent Council. And it was during that time in the early 90s that a young Black man, teenager called Stephen Lawrence, was murdered. And the people listening may have heard his name. And he was murdered because some people ask me about, what do you think that was all about? And I say, well, he wasn't murdered because he was Black. And people kind of react when I say that. Of course he was. And I said, no, he wasn't. He was murdered because of hate. He was murdered because of the racist hearts of the perpetrator. There's a difference. If somebody says, well, a woman was attacked and sexually assaulted because of what she was wearing. No, she wasn't. She was attacked and sexually assaulted because of the perpetrator and his inability, or his willingness rather, to commit crime. And I'm quite clear that, the perpetrator is where the blame needs to be with crime, and not, somebody being Black isn't a reason for a crime. Somebody being gay or disabled, being a woman, etc., disabled, it's the perpetrator. Put the blame where it belongs, because until we do, we don't solve the problems. They just keep repeating themselves. With an eye on the time, and further to my role at Essex Police as diversity and inclusion manager there, I would say to the people listening, the younger people, the older people, the people who were brought up to believe certain things about other people, the more you learn about people who are different, the more you learn about how similar you are to those people. And most of all, the more you learn about yourself. We are always growing. We should always be learning throughout our lives. So my advice to people is mix with people who are different from yourselves, because it's in that mixing that we learn to build bridges, that we overcome our biases, the things that we learn from our parents or from our people who have a particular view about other people who they don't really talk to. We grow and we learn so much about being human, the human family. The police is an area of, or policing is an area of work that I was, I still receive a fair amount of mail of people that call me names, mostly online, about being a traitor. Well, we know who pays your salary. And I'm quite clear that I want to see more heroes in uniform, heroes who are Black, Asian, white, people who are heterosexual, who are gay, etc., etc. There is nothing stopping you from becoming a hero in uniform. The incessant narrative that I keep hearing, particularly in the Black community, oh, the police are the enemy. No, the police are not the enemy. They are not. If you don't like what the police do and how they do it, join. Don't moan. Join and help the police become the service that it wants to be and that you know it could be if it had your talent. So stay out of trouble, because if you get into trouble, chances of joining are going to be reduced. Love yourself enough to listen to your own heartbeat. You have your own heartbeat for a reason. You also have your own ears to listen more than you talk. And most of all, you have a right to live your life and be happy doing something that you really want to do, not what other people want you to do, but what you want to do. And you will always find support in the police. So don't listen to the negative narratives, listen to your heartbeat and be one of those heroes in uniform. I will hush up now and hand back to Rani unless she wants me to say something else.
Vernal, you know, I didn't know all your background and I admire you so much. You are so modest because you have written books, and you didn't mention the people that came to see you in Brent, which includes Princess Diana, George Michael, Dionne Warwick. Was it Dionne Warwick?
Dionne Warwick, Whitney Houston.
Whitney Houston. I
Whitney.
mean, you know, just drop it in, won't you? What I absolutely love about you is that you said you came to the police force. Forgive me, I don't know her name, but by seeing what was happening with those Vietnamese, and you were so impressed by that. And then she interviewed you for the job across the table.
Yes, Mom Pippa Mills, her name is, and I, like the rest of the public, saw the news reports, and when I saw the job, you know, I thought to myself, well, I've always been supportive of the police, and at first I said to myself, do I really want to do this? And then I got shortlisted for it. And then I, you know, got to the interview and there she was, you know, so I was, you know, professionally enough myself not to say anything about, you know, the fact that I recognized her. But after I was fortunate to be appointed, I still said nothing to her directly until much later that I posted something on Twitter about it. But I really did admire Essex Police and the dignity that they offered, not just to, you know, the way they treated the bodies of the deceased, but the way they treated those families. And that to me is the kind of organisation that we should all want to work for. Lovely.
Thank you very much. Well, just a little bit of background before I bring in Rhiannon, because she's waiting patiently, is that I started through Unity, the charity, with Damilola Taylor's father, Richard, and also, and this brings back to BJ in Waltham Forest, because the lecturer in Waltham Forest College was Ian Levy, whose son Robert was killed when he was only 16. And in the square of Hackney, he went out and defended the life of a 14-year-old boy who was being threatened by a 15-year-old with a knife. He said 4 words, Vernon: "You can't do that." He took 5 knife blows and he died on the steps of Hackney Town Hall. There's a white bench and it says the words that you said when you were talking: "Be the change you want to be." Mahatma Gandhi. I'm very proud that we're working together. Through Unity is still part of my organization. We work very closely and we want to come, and this is how I'm going to bring Rhiannon in, because going into schools, going into FE colleges, going to universities and saying to a young person, don't pick up that knife. It could be your mother that's crying over your blood running in a ditch. And so over now to Rhiannon. Hello, dear. You're there in your scrubs. Just off the ward, are you? Yes.
Hi, yeah.
Hello. So this is Rhiannon Madden Hansel, who's going to tell you a little bit about it. She's also a Windrush child, but working very hard in Basildon Hospital. So over to you. Sorry you've had to wait so long, love.
No, not at all. First, I'd like to thank you for inviting me to be on this panel with such incredible speakers. I've been so inspired listening to their stories. And they're going to be hard acts to follow, but I'll try. So as Rani said, my name is Rihanna. I'm 24 years old and I'm currently in my final year of medical school. So I'm in my clinical placement at Basildon Hospital. So a bit of background, as Rani said, my family originally are from Jamaica. Both sets of my grandparents travelled over as part of the Windrush generation and set up life in Birmingham. They, you know, what like Bernal was saying, worked many different jobs to create like a happy life for their children here. And then my parents moved to from Birmingham to London, where they actually met. And I'm really fortunate that I've had a really lucky upbringing in terms of the schools I've been able to attend and the opportunities that have come from such situations. So I did my A-levels, applied to medical school, got accepted to UCL. So I did kind of the opposite to BJ. I was the South London girl that moved to North London to cross the Thames. And that was quite an eye-opening experience because at school, I was always the minority and I kind of just accepted that's just what it was. And then moving to university, I always thought London uni would be a bit more diverse, and then was a bit surprised looking at my cohort at medical school and thinking, oh no, like I'm a minority again. So that's quite an interesting thing, but then you learn from those experiences that although you may be in a minority in those situations, you can bring a lot from your experiences that you've had and kind of the background that you come from. So kind of bringing it back to like the NHS and working on the wards now, I've learned that from observing and seeing different situations that sometimes the best connections between doctors and patients are with the doctors that maybe not have the traditional background of going to a really good school, doctors, parents who are doctors as well, they've come from a different background and they can really connect with patients. They understand when patients say they can't adhere to certain medication or they can't follow the plans that the doctors want to be in place because of their social situation. So I think sometimes the things that you may want to hide from people because they make you seem different and they make you stand out a little bit of what it's your strengths that you can bring to teams and to situations, because you're coming to the situation from a different mindset and you can bring a little extra. I was also going to talk about what it was like at university, being a minority and thinking, oh, maybe you don't belong here. And people talk about imposter syndrome quite a lot. And it's that kind of niggling feeling at the back of your head that, oh, I'm here, but maybe someone's going to catch me out one day and be like, actually, you don't belong here, you shouldn't be here. But it's kind of just telling yourself that when you get given an opportunity, don't let those feelings hinder you. You know, you're there and someone said and given you the green light to be there. So you just have to make the most of it. Take up every opportunity that's kind of thrown your way if you think that if that's what you want to do. And I think also within medicine, the profession is starting to realise that people have different hobbies and different interests, and there's more scope for you to pick up extra things outside of medicine and in your career. So, for example, if you're interested in technology, there's big moves to like bring that more into medicine. If you're into leadership, doctors as leaders is a big thing, as educators. So medicine is a lifelong career, but I don't think you have to go into it thinking, right, I'm just going to be a doctor on the ward from, you know, the age of 18 to when I retire. There's so much more you can do in between that, and there's a lot of flexibility. And then Rani wanted me to speak a little bit on kind of knife crime and youth violence that happens. And just from my experience, I did an integrated degree in paediatrics and child health. And as part of that, I did a safeguarding module, and I was based up at North Middlesex Hospital. And they have quite a lot of issues with knife crime around that area, especially with youth violence. So what they've kind of introduced is a charity that employs youth workers that are either ex-gang members or have been to prison before or kind of know quite a lot about that situation and environment. And they get them in to come and speak to children and young people when they've come in with a stab wound, for example. and try and explain to them in terms that they'll understand, from a background that they understand, that there usually are other options, and kind of working with them to get them away from that cycle of violence. Yeah, so those were kind of the main things I wanted to say, and just that medicine is an option for everyone, if that's what you want to do, and you should never think that you're not good enough or you don't belong there. If that's what you want to do, work hard, get your grades, try and find a mentor. There's loads of great mentors out there who are willing to help people who aren't quite sure how to get into it, but know that that's something they want to do. And once you find that mentor, like, hold on to them and they'll get you through it.
That's fantastic. That's really fantastic. Now, you didn't get any curry yesterday. I took my chicken curry and my chickpea curry and rushed off the hospital. Catherine, sitting over there, has been cooking today as well. We can't do very much, you know, clapping and cooking. We want to do things like building you decent homes, making sure that you're warm, comfortable, because it's not just you, it's the police force, as I said, you know, it's everybody out there who are keeping us safe. It's our little way of saying, we love you, thank you. We can't physically be there when you're going through the traumas of bodies piling up behind the door. When my husband and I dropped off the food last night, there were huge tankers of oxygen and clouds of smoke. I didn't know what it was. I thought it was going to blow up. But just think how much strain you must be under, with Basildon being one of the worst hospitals for death at one time, the top of the league. So listen, Rihanna, we absolutely, well, you're one of the heroes in a cape, aren't you? You must be Robin, your little Robin to the rest of the old Batmen sitting there. So thank you very much. I am extremely grateful for you to come along. And are we coming up close? Yes, we come 2 minutes before the end. Let me just say one thing, that I am absolutely delighted. I was late, and it's my fault with a little bit of rushing in the beginning, because I've had a phone call. I had a phone call from the private office of the Apprenticeship Minister, Gillian Keegan, and she's coming tomorrow. She's coming tomorrow to our construction event. So 1:30 to 3 o'clock. Please try. We will start on time, but you will hear and see a lot of wonderful things. I think BJ was going. Thank him for staying, because he was only going to stay for half an hour. And Yetunde, as always, thank you so much for standing by. The Next Chosen Generation works with young people in Basildon and is great. So thank you so much, and good night all. Hope you enjoyed it. Tell all your friends to go and view on Zoom.
Okay, thank you so much, Rani, for being an excellent host. Thank you to all the speakers, and we look forward to having more speakers tomorrow. Thank you, Rani, for all the hard work that you have put into this program for the whole week. So we're not only back tomorrow, we are back on Thursday and Friday as well. And of course, Rani's full of surprises, so don't be surprised what you get tomorrow, but it's going to be even better tomorrow. We will get the technology sorted out. So sincere apologies to the slight glitch at the beginning, but it has been an awesome time. It's been very inspirational for me, and I learned so much from all the speakers. It's amazing how you can never tell somebody's background or experience by looking at them. But we've all got our experiences, we've all got our history, we've all got so many things that has happened to us in the past that actually it's an inspiration to the next generation. And of course, you know, this is Apprenticeship Week for the year 2021, brought to you by Z Generation. Our host tonight and for the rest of the week is Rani Moorcroft. So please appreciate her, because if we were live, we would be clapping for Rani right now. So if you can, clap for her, even though you're watching in the comfort of your own home on a day like this. So enjoy the snow, enjoy Rani. It's been a beautiful evening, and tomorrow is going to be even better. So we look forward to welcoming you all back tomorrow. Bye for now, and we'll see you soon. Bye.
Good night. Bye-bye all.
Bye all.